The Galactic Academy of Infinite Minds was built on the edge of the expanse, a place where all known sentient species converged to exchange knowledge, philosophies, and most importantly, train in survival. Spread across several star systems, it was widely regarded as the ultimate institution for anyone brave enough to represent their species in the arena of galactic politics, warfare, and exploration. The Academy was colossal, built from shining metal alloys that refracted the light of distant stars, giving the illusion of a gleaming beacon of knowledge. Classrooms were suspended in vast, hollowed-out space stations where gravity fluctuated, and AI-directed drones guided students through simulations so advanced that some questioned if they were truly virtual. Among the hundreds of sentient species studying at the Academy, one race was regarded with suspicion: humans, or Deathworlders, as they were sometimes called in hushed whispers. Earth, their home planet, was considered a death world by galactic standards, a place so hostile that only the insane would consider it habitable. For centuries, humanity had been excluded from galactic affairs, but things were changing. Vereen, a gray-skinned alien with large glassy eyes and spindly limbs, stood at the front of his classroom, adjusting the display in front of him. He was an instructor in alien physiology, a veteran of the Academy, and regarded humans with the same mix of skepticism and curiosity as his peers. His voice echoed in the cold metallic classroom, designed for zero gravity, where the walls were lined with glowing data streams. As you know, today's lesson will focus on the physiology of Deathworlders, specifically humans. They are considered an anomaly in galactic biology, Vereen stated, his voice calm but his large black eyes shimmering with an unspoken sense of apprehension. Sitting among the class were representatives from dozens of species, all staring at the holographic images of humans projected in front of them. The humanoid figure floated in mid-air, dissected into multiple transparent layers showing muscles, bones, and organs. Each layer flickered with annotations. Across from the lectern, one student remained impassive. Kaltor Ajan, a towering figure with 6 arms and vibrant green skin, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the human hologram. "Humans are dangerous, Vereen. We've all heard the stories," Kaltor rumbled. "Their world is filled with hostile creatures, poisonous plants, extreme weather. They thrive where most of us would perish." Vereen nodded. "Indeed, their homeworld is classified as a death world, but this is precisely why we must study them. To understand is to survive." At the back of the room, unnoticed by most, sat Jonas Reed. One of the few humans admitted to the Academy, he had a reputation for being quiet, calculating, and sometimes too competitive. His dark hair was cut short, and his pale skin stood out among the other students. His blue eyes watched the conversation with a disarming calmness, his hands folded in his lap. Unlike many of the other recruits, Jonas hadn't come here to learn about aliens. He came to prove something to the galaxy, that humans weren't just survivors. They were conquerors. "Reed!" Vereen's voice cut through the chatter. "Since you are one of the Deathworlders we are discussing today, would you care to give your perspective on human physiology?" All eyes turned to Jonas, and he met their gaze with a slight smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. He stood up slowly, adjusting his uniform. "Sure," he said, his voice level and calm. "Human physiology is a lot simpler than you think. We adapt. It's our greatest strength. The conditions on Earth forced us to evolve to handle just about anything thrown our way." Vereen's elongated fingers tapped the display in front of him, and the hologram of the human skeleton rotated. "But surely that adaptation has limits. Your species is still ... FR agile." Jonas smirked. "Maybe, but we don't just adapt physically, we learn fast." Kaltor let out a deep laugh, his 6 arms crossing over his broad chest. "Words, Deathworlder, anyone can talk about how tough they are." Jonas's smirk widened. "Words? Fine, let's test that." The room fell silent as the challenge lingered in the air. Everyone, including Vereen, knew what Jonas was suggesting. Challenges between species at the Academy were not uncommon, but it was rare for a human to step up and issue one. The humans were always cautious, until now. Vereen raised one spindly hand. Read, a challenge is unnecessary. We are here to learn, not to fight. Learning through action, Jonas said firmly. That's how humans work. There was a moment of hesitation. The other students exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. But Vereen, ever the scholar, was intrigued. He waved his hand, and the holographic display shifted, pulling up a list of challenges that could be simulated in the training grounds. Very well, Vereen said, though his tone was skeptical. We shall see if your claims hold up in the arena. This will be a controlled exercise, of course. Jonas nodded. Controlled or not, the outcome will be the same. Outside the classroom, in the massive training dome that simulated various environments, Jonas stood on one side, while Kaltor and 3 other students from different species stood opposite him. The dome's environment shifted rapidly, cycling through different landscapes, a scorching desert, an ice field, a dense jungle, a barren asteroid surface. Your task is simple, Vereen's voice echoed through the dome's speakers. Survive. Jonas cracked his knuckles and focused. This wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message to the Academy and beyond, that Deathworlders were far more than the galaxy had bargained for. Chapter 2. The test begins. The training dome's ceiling hummed with mechanical precision as the environmental simulator locked in the first terrain, a desolate, frozen wasteland. Icy winds howled through the dome, kicking up snow and freezing mist that swirled around Jonas and the other students. The temperature dropped instantly, biting at the skin of anyone unprepared. Jonas Reed stood firm, his breath visible in the cold air. His eyes narrowed as he sized up his opponents. Kaltor Aegon, with his 6 arms and towering frame, was the most obvious threat. His species hailed from a high-gravity planet where the atmosphere was thick and the temperature varied little. The freezing cold was not a condition he was built to endure. On Kaltor's left stood Rylith, a member of a species known for their highly sensitive neural systems. Rylith's long silver tendrils twitched in the wind, trying to regulate body temperature. Her kind could react with lightning speed, but under the extreme cold, her sharp reflexes were dulled. Beside Rylith was Dravian, a hulking reptilian creature with deep black scales that shimmered with every motion. His physiology was better suited for deserts and swamps, but cold. His movements were slow and cumbersome in these conditions. Finally, there was Zeke, a small insectoid being whose exoskeleton was an excellent insulator. Of all Jonas's opponents, Zeke was likely the best suited for this climate, but his size put him at a disadvantage. He moved quickly, darting through the snow like a shadow, his antennae twitching, searching for Jonas. Vereen's voice echoed in the dome, calm and collected. The task is survival. The environment will shift periodically, testing your ability to adapt. All combatants must stay within the dome's boundaries. Use your environment, your instincts, and your species' strengths to succeed. As the instructor spoke, Jonas clenched his fists and took a deep breath. Asterisk, asterisk, survive, asterisk, asterisk. A word that had more meaning to a human than to any of the aliens in the dome. On Earth, survival wasn't just about enduring harsh climates. It was about navigating a world filled with predators, hostile terrain, and constant danger. He had grown up in the shadow of this reality, and here, he felt strangely at home. The cold intensified, frost began to form on the ground, and the air turned to ice with each breath. Jonas scanned the dome, looking for an opportunity. He knew Kaltor and Dravian wouldn't last long in this freezing environment. Zekuk, though fast, wouldn't be much of a problem once Jonas could predict his patterns. Rylith might pose a challenge if she overcame the cold, but her reflexes were slow now. Jonas's eyes locked on Kaltor. The towering alien's skin had already started to take on a bluish tint, and his movements became sluggish. Without hesitation, Jonas darted toward him, moving as quickly and silently as the wind allowed. Kaltor saw him coming too late. Jonas swept low, ducking beneath one of Kaltor's flailing arms, and drove his shoulder into the alien's midsection. The force was enough to knock Kaltor off balance, sending him crashing into the frozen ground. "You're not built for this," Jonas said coldly, stepping back. Kaltor struggled to rise, his 6 arms flailing in the snow. He growled in frustration, but the cold was too much for his system. His strength, impressive as it was, couldn't compensate for the fact that his physiology was breaking down. After a few more seconds of struggling, Kaltor slumped in the snow, shivering uncontrollably. He was out. Jonas turned his attention to the others. Zik had disappeared, but Jonas could hear the faint sound of his claws skittering over the frozen ground. He crouched low, waiting, his senses attuned to the slight vibrations in the ice. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught the flicker of movement, Zik darting toward him, attempting to catch him off guard. Jonas reacted instantly, his reflexes honed from years of training. He sidestepped just as Zik lunged, then reached out and grabbed one of the insectoid's spindly limbs. With a quick twist, Jonas sent Zik sprawling into the snow. The smaller alien scrambled to his feet, his antennae twitching in confusion. "Fast, but not fast enough," Jonas muttered, his breath forming a cloud in the frigid air. Before Zeke could recover, Jonas delivered a swift kick to the side of his exoskeleton, sending him skidding across the ice. Zeke screeched in pain, the impact knocking him unconscious. 2 down. A sudden burst of movement caught Jonas's attention. Rylith was charging at him. Despite the cold affecting her, she was still fast. Her neural system allowed her to process information at incredible speeds, even in this compromised state. Jonas barely had time to dodge as her silver tendrils lashed out, aiming for his throat. He ducked, rolling through the snow to avoid the attack. Rylith pressed forward, her speed and aggression making up for her slower reaction times. But Jonas was patient. He had learned to endure, to wait for the right moment. She lunged again, her tendrils whipping through the air. This time Jonas didn't dodge. He stepped forward inside her reach and grabbed her by the arm. With a swift motion, he twisted her wrist, forcing her to the ground. Rylith gasped in shock, unable to comprehend how quickly Jonas had countered her attack. "Humans, adapt," Jonas said quietly, his grip firm as he held her down. He released her after a moment, knowing she was too exhausted to continue. Rylith staggered back, defeated. Now only Dravian remained. The reptilian alien had been watching, moving slowly through the snow. His heavy, lumbering frame was a disadvantage in this cold environment, but he was biding his time, waiting for the moment when the environment would shift again. Jonas could see it in his dark eyes. Dravian was hoping the cold would end soon, but Jonas wasn't going to wait for the next shift. He sprinted toward Dravian, his breath steady, his focus sharp. Dravian reacted sluggishly, trying to swing his heavy tail in defense, but Jonas was already too close. He ducked beneath the tail and landed a sharp punch to the alien's side. Dravian roared, his deep voice vibrating through the air, but his movements were slow, too slow to keep up with Jonas's speed. With a final push, Jonas knocked Dravian off balance, sending him crashing into the snow. The reptilian alien lay still, his body too cold and too heavy to move. The training dome fell silent. Varine's voice echoed again, but this time it carried a note of awe. "Challenge completed. Reed, you have proven yourself." Jonas stood alone in the snow, his breath slowing as the adrenaline left his system. He looked around at the fallen students, each one powerful in their own right, but none of them had what humans had: adaptability. As the dome shifted again, the cold receding and the environment warming to a tropical jungle, Jonas turned to the observation deck, where Varine and the other instructors watched. "This isn't just survival," Jonas said to himself, wiping the frost from his face. "It's domination." Orin gasped for breath, the edges of his vision darkening. He could feel the strength draining from his body, his blaster slipping from his grasp. Suddenly a flash of light erupted from behind the enforcer. Saris had activated the ship's main cannons. A beam of energy shot forward, hitting the enforcer square in the chest, sending him flying back across the hangar. "Get in!" Saris screamed, dragging Orin up the ramp as the ship's engines roared to life. ###****. Chapter 5. A New Alliance ****. The * Valkyrie * blasted out of Solaris Nexus just as the hangar bay doors closed behind them, trapping the remaining Dominion soldiers inside. Orin slumped against the bulkhead, breathing heavily as Saris guided the ship through the vast expanse of space. His side throbbed, but the adrenaline still rushing through his body kept him from collapsing completely. Alex, safely secured in his seat, watched them with wide eyes, unfazed by the violent escape. "You did good," Saris said, glancing at Orin with a slight smile as she brought the ship into hyperspace. Orin winced as he clutched his wound. "That was too close." Saris nodded, her expression hardening. "They're not going to stop. The Dominion knows what you are, and they know what Alex means. We've only bought ourselves some time." Orin groaned. "You still haven't explained any of this. Why is he so important? And why the hell am I involved?" Sarah stood from the pilot's chair, walking over to where Alex sat, gazing at the stars passing by the window. "He's the last of his kind," she said softly. "A species that holds the key to something far greater than anything you've ever encountered. They can unlock technologies that could change the balance of power in the galaxy." Orin frowned, trying to make sense of it all. "And what do I have to do with it?" Cyrus hesitated, then met his eyes. "Your DNA is the final piece. Alex was never supposed to survive. His people were wiped out long before the Dominion came into power. But when you and I met, something happened. The ancient technology inside you, it's part of him now. Together, you both represent the future." Orin shook his head in disbelief. "You're telling me I'm some kind of key?" "You are," she replied. "And they'll stop at nothing to control you." Silence hung between them as Orin processed her words. This was bigger than any job he'd ever taken. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting something far more valuable than himself, something that could change the fate of the galaxy. Finally, Orin spoke, his voice gruff but resolute. "What's our next move?" Saris looked out into the endless expanse of space. "We find allies. The Dominion may control a lot, but there are still those who resist. We need to gather forces, find a place to hide, and prepare for what's coming." Orin nodded, glancing at Alex once more. "Then let's get started." As the stars streaked past them, Orin realized there was no turning back. He was no longer just a mercenary. He was a father, a protector, and now the galaxy's last hope against a rising darkness. The dome's atmosphere shifted, a wave of heat replacing the bitter cold as the frozen wasteland transformed into a dense, steamy jungle. The air became thick with moisture, and the scent of damp earth filled Jonas's lungs. The leaves of massive alien plants dripped with condensation, and towering trees with twisted, luminescent vines surrounded him. The jungle was alive with the chirps, growls, and hums of unseen creatures that roamed just out of sight. Jonas stood motionless, his muscles still tense from the previous battle. His opponents were out, sprawled on the ground. But the test wasn't over yet. This new environment would present its own challenges, and Jonas knew better than to assume victory too soon. The Academy's tests were designed to push recruits beyond their limits, and the jungle was far from the final stage. As he moved through the undergrowth, careful not to disturb the alien fauna, he took stock of his situation. His body had cooled down quickly from the freezing environment, but now the humidity made every breath thick. His clothing clung to his skin, drenched in sweat. The jungle seemed to pulse with life, and Jonas felt as if the very air was watching him. The dome's AI-controlled environment systems were relentless. This test wasn't just about combat, it was about survival in the face of constantly changing and hostile conditions. His alien instructors watched closely from their observation decks, but Jonas had already learned to tune them out. The real challenge was in front of him, the jungle, with all its hidden dangers. The thick canopy overhead filtered the light, casting eerie shadows on the ground, making it hard to tell where anything really was. Jonas moved swiftly but quietly, each step calculated. His senses were on high alert. Earth had taught him to never let his guard down, especially in environments that appeared tranquil. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the underbrush, and Jonas froze. His muscles tensed as he scanned the area, eyes darting between the thick leaves and tall grass. The growl came again, closer this time. Jonas reached for a sharp stone he had picked up earlier, ready to use it if necessary. From the shadows emerged a massive, feline-like creature. Its fur shimmered in the dim light, a pattern of bioluminescent stripes across its sleek, muscled frame. It was clearly a predator, adapted to the jungle's low-light conditions, and it had Jonas in its sights. The creature's eyes locked onto him, glowing with an unnatural intensity. Its movements were slow and deliberate, every muscle in its body coiled like a spring ready to explode. Jonas crouched, gripping the stone tightly in his hand. He had faced predators like this on Earth, large, powerful beasts designed to kill with efficiency. But this wasn't Earth, and this creature was clearly something more. Time seemed to slow as Jonas calculated his options. Running wasn't feasible. The creature would pounce on him in an instant. He had to outthink it, use its instincts against it. The beast snarled, showing a row of sharp, glistening teeth. Then, in a sudden burst of speed, it leaped toward Jonas, its claws extended. Jonas sidestepped just in time, feeling the wind of its attack as it sailed past him. He didn't hesitate. Using the momentum of his dodge, he swung the stone, smashing it into the side of the creature's head. The beast let out a furious roar, but it wasn't enough to take it down. It whipped around, lashing out with its tail, which was covered in barbed spikes. Jonas ducked, barely avoiding the tail as it swished through the air, cutting through the leaves and grass like a scythe. Jonas rolled to the side, rising to his feet just in time to see the creature pouncing again. This time he was ready. He threw the stone with all his strength, aiming for the creature's glowing eyes. The stone struck true, hitting it squarely in the face. The creature howled in pain, stumbling back as its vision blurred. Seizing the opportunity, Jonas darted forward, grabbing a thick vine from the nearest tree. With swift, precise movements, he wrapped the vine around the creature's neck, using its own weight to choke it. The beast thrashed violently, but Jonas held on, pulling the vine tighter. After what felt like an eternity, the creature's movement slowed, its growls fading into weak whimpers. Finally it collapsed, unconscious. Jonas released the vine, breathing heavily, his muscles burning with exertion. As he stepped back from the creature, the jungle around him seemed to come alive again. The chirping of insects, the rustling of leaves, and the distant growls of other unseen creatures filled the air. Jonas knew that while he had survived this encounter, the jungle still held more threats. But as he moved deeper into the undergrowth, something unexpected happened. The dome shifted again. The jungle's temperature didn't change, but the terrain morphed into something far more surreal. Trees began to glow with an iridescent light, and the ground beneath his feet became soft, like walking on air. Strange plants rose from the earth, their tendrils pulsating with energy. Jonas felt a sense of unease creep over him. This wasn't a natural jungle anymore. He paused for a moment, looking around, his senses tingling with anticipation. He had heard rumors of the Academy's advanced simulation capabilities, but this was something else entirely. The environment was no longer just a test of physical survival. It was becoming a test of perception and mental endurance. The dome was altering reality itself. Jonas took a deep breath, centering himself. He had faced worse than this on Earth. He could handle illusions, simulations, even reality-bending environments. What he couldn't afford was hesitation. A voice, soft and distant, echoed in his mind. It wasn't Varine's voice, nor the AI overseeing the dome. It was something alien, something beyond the technology of the Academy. You are not alone. Jonas spun around, his heart racing. There was no one there. The jungle was empty, save for the faint glow of the plants and the ever-present hum of life. But the voice, it had been real. He was certain of it. His grip on the stone tightened. Whatever was happening in this simulation, it was starting to get into his head. He needed to focus, to remind himself that this was just another test, an advanced simulation designed to push him to his limits. But deep down, a nagging thought gnawed at the edges of his mind. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and Jonas's heart skipped a beat. He quickly crouched, steadying himself as the jungle around him began to warp and twist. Trees stretched impossibly high, their branches intertwining like a web of light and shadow. The plants at his feet began to pulse faster, their glow becoming blinding. And then, without warning, the dome fell into complete silence. Jonas's breath hitched. The jungle had been alive with sound just moments ago, but now, nothing. Not even the faintest rustle of leaves. It was as if the entire environment had frozen in time. And then the voice returned, clearer this time. Jonas felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't sure if it was the environment or something else entirely, but for the first time since entering the Academy, he felt genuinely uncertain. He glanced upward toward the observation deck where the instructors usually monitored the tests, but instead of seeing the familiar gleam of the observation windows, he saw nothing. Just darkness, stretching endlessly. Jonas's instincts screamed at him to stay alert. Something was happening in the dome, something far beyond a simple test. And if he wasn't careful, it could be his last.